Good morning. I am Molly Brinkerhoff, today's worship associate. Welcome to this December morning. And be thankful you're not in the sanctuary. It's very chilly in here. And I'm glad we can be together, at least in community, virtual community. This service is brought to you by Reverend Kevin Carson, Andrew White, and myself from the church's sanctuary. Again, welcome, whether you are a longtime member or to this church or this is your first time. We have quite a few announcements today, so please bear with me. Our first weekly announcement is if you are able to, please sign in on the chat box to the right of your screen. This will let us know who is joining us today. We will be having joys, concerns, and sorrows today, and if you didn't email them to the worship team, now is the time to put them in the chat box so a candle can be lit for you. Please indicate if it is a joy, sorrow, or a concern. It has also been noted that new people have been joining us for our live Sunday service. If you are new and would like to get on our email newsletter, please call the church administrative office and leave a message with your email address. Also, if you would like to talk to someone about the church, please again contact our office. We are so glad you are joining us. The worship team is looking for holiday pictures from you. Please send us any pictures of you and or your family celebrating the holidays. We will try to use it at our Christmas Eve service, and it's a great way to help us keep connected. While we are no longer having an offertory time during the service, it is still important nonetheless. To maintain this free church, we need everyone to fulfill this year's pledges if you haven't already. We also would gratefully receive any other donations to support us. Just go to our website to click on the Give button, and anything will be gratefully received. Another important note that needs to be mentioned today is the pledge cards had the wrong church P.O. box on it. So your pledge will probably be returned to you if you have already mailed it. We are so sorry for the inconvenience, but please resend it to the church with the P.O. Box 50376. That information should be in your weekly newsletter. All these pledges are so important to the viability of our church for the year 2021. We will now hear a stewardship testimonial from Lisa Christensen.
I give to the UUCIF because as a newcomer to Idaho Falls, this is where I made friends, found a spiritual community, and opportunities for social justice action. I'd like to thank the UUCIF for making Idaho Falls feel like home. I give to the UUCIF.
Thank you, Lisa. Also, be sure to stay for our virtual coffee hour after the service by clicking the link in the email. We will now move into the sacred time of worship. Breath is a verb meaning to take in air, oxygen into the lungs and expel it. Inhale, exhale. Breath is to pause and move air gently. Breath is to allow us to rest and recover. To deprive our breath, we tire and exhaust. To breathe freely provides relief from anxiety, tension, and pressure. So breathe easily. Inhale and exhale as I ring the peace bowl 3 times. Let go of the anxiety, tension, and pressure. We will begin our service with our prelude. Since we are not all together, I will read our church covenant for us all. Please recite it from home with me if you like. Love is the spirit of this community and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. We will now be lighting our chalice. If you have a candle or chalice available, please light yours with us. Our chalice lighting today is by Crystal Hogan. In the presence of this fire, we hear the voice of our God, of our goddess, of our holy. You are on sacred ground. In the presence of the flame in me, in you, in us, moving, resting, gathering, We are on sacred ground. In the presence of this fire, we are compelled to take up a torch, to carry a flame, to seek a sacred ground. In the presence of this spark, we are committed to the light of the fire of passion, of life, of holy work, to journey towards truth on sacred ground.
Good morning. Our call to worship this morning is the poem When I Am Among the Trees by Mary Oliver. When I am among the trees, especially the willows and the honey locust, equally the beech, the oaks, and the pines, they give off such hints of gladness. I would almost say they save me, and daily. I am so distant from the hope of myself, in which I have goodness and discernment, and never hurry throughout the world, but walk slowly and bow often. Around me the trees stir in their leaves and call out, "Stay a while." The light flows from their branches. And they call again, "It's simple," they say, "and you too have come into the world to do this. To go easy, to be filled with light, and to shine." I invite you to join in our opening hymn.
Today's Time for All Ages is called Sophia's Guest by Becky Brooks. Once upon a time there was a teacher named Sophia. Sophia had been a teacher in the town where she lived for so long that the kids she first had in her class grew up and had kids of their own and sent them to her class too. Nearly everyone in the town knew Sophia and loved her because not only was she an excellent teacher, but she was also very kind. One day when Sophia got to work, she found a note on her desk. The note read, "Dear Sophia, I will be around tomorrow. I wonder if I might stop by your house for tea tomorrow afternoon. Your friend, God." At first, Sophia thought it was a joke, but the more she thought about it, the more she realized that if it was a joke, it wasn't a very funny joke, and she couldn't think of anyone who would play a joke on her like that. Then she thought, what if it wasn't a joke? What if God really was going to come to her house tomorrow afternoon? Sophia thought she should get ready, just in case. On her way home from work, she stopped by the store and bought one of those mats people put on their porch that says in big letters, "Welcome." When she got home, she cleaned her house from top to bottom. She brought in fresh flowers from the garden and put them in a vase in the living room. She cleaned and cleaned until everything was sparkly. In the morning, Sophia had realized she didn't know what God liked to eat, so she baked bread and made a casserole and fruit salad and baked some cookies too. And what about the tea? Did God like hot tea or iced tea? She thought she'd better make both. And what if God's favorite thing in the whole world was lemonade? She thought she should make some of that too. She was so nervous. She didn't know what to expect. Just then there was a knock at the door. Sophia's heart went pat, pat, pat. She took a deep, big breath, opened the door slowly, and on the other side was the mayor of the town. "Hello, Sophia. I was walking by and smelled the delicious fresh baked bread." Sophia said, "I'm so glad you're here. Come in, come in. I am expecting a very important visitor whom you might want to meet. Please come in and make yourself at home." Sophia and the mayor sat, having a nice discussion, when there was a knock at the door. Sophia's heart went pat, pat, pat. She took a deep breath, opened the door slowly, and on the other side was a group of children from her class. "Hello, Miss Sophia. We were walking by and noticed the smell of fresh-baked cookies." Sophia said, "I'm so glad you're here. Come in, come in. I am expecting a very important visitor whom you might want to meet. Please come in and help yourself to some cookies." The children were giving the mayor some much-needed advice when there was a knock at the door. Sophia's heart went pat, pat, pat. Deep breath, open door. It was the entire Women's Covenant group from church. "Hello, Sophia. We heard the tea kettle and laughter and thought you might be having a party." Sophia said, "I'm so glad you're here. Come in, come in. I am expecting a very important visitor whom you might want to meet. Please come in and make yourself at home." All afternoon, people stopped by Sophia's house, lured by the yummy smells and happy sounds. The townspeople filled her house upstairs and downstairs and overflowed into the backyard and the front yard. As they got hungry, they made dinner together and ate as the sun set and the moon rose. It was a great party. People were playing games and telling stories and baking and playing music and talking together. Sophia had such a nice time that she completely forgot about her very important guest. Even as she waved goodbye to her friends at the end of the night, she felt only contentment at having such a lovely party. In the morning, though, Sophia woke up and remembered everything. She was confused. Whatever had happened to God? All during her walk to work, she tried to figure out what had happened. Along the way, she smiled and waved to the people she ran into who had been at her party. She thought to herself that she really should do that again sometime. When Sophia arrived at work, she was surprised to find another note on her desk. It read, "Dear Sophia, I had such a wonderful time yesterday. The bread was delicious, the cookies were divine. Tea mixed with lemonade is my very favorite. Thank you for being such a wonderful host. I hope we can do it again soon. Love, God." The end.
We are now going to have Joys and Concerns. This is a very special time in our congregation where each of us has an opportunity to share major events in our lives, our joys, our concerns, and our sorrows, so we can all be uplifted by our UU community. As I read our joys, concerns, and sorrows that were emailed to us, Reverend Kevin will light a candle. So I only received a couple. There's a joy from Joyce Chambers. She is feeling good and appreciated the beautiful flowers she received after her recent hospitalization. They are off to Vancouver, Washington to greet their new grand and great-grandchild into the world. So congratulations on that. Reverend Kevin has two concerns. One, his mother, who remains in the hospital recovering from a leg wound. We wish her well. And then a sorrow from Alice Claire DeChutlis of Helena, Montana, who died Friday from COVID at the age of 88. She was the mother of Reverend Kevin's spiritual director, Monica Verplagen. So we are very sorry about that. And I don't believe any more have come in. And I light an additional candle for all those joys, concerns, and sorrows we hold in our hearts and are unable to share them today. Stay healthy and strong, UU members and friends. Our UU community lifts up its love for each and every one of you.
Our first reading this morning is an excerpt from the book Deep is the Hunger by Howard Thurman. There must be always remaining in every man's life some place for the singing of angels, some place for that which in itself is breathlessly beautiful and by inherent prerogative throws all of the rest of life into a new and creative restlessness, something that gathers up in itself all the freshets of experience from drab and commonplace areas of living and glows in one bright white light of penetrating beauty and meaning, then passes. The commonplace is shot through with new glory. Old burdens become lighter. Deep and ancient wounds lose much of their old hurting. A crown is placed over our heads that for the rest of our lives we are trying to grow tall enough to wear. Despite all the crassness of life, despite all the hardness of life, despite all the harsh discords of life, life is saved by the singing angels. I invite you to join in singing our next hymn, number 27, I Am That Great and Fiery Force. Our second reading this morning is an excerpt from the book Holy the Firm by Annie Dillard. Every day is a God. Each day is a God. And holiness holds firm in time. I worship each God. I praise each day splintered down and wrapped up in time like a husk of many colors spreading at dawn, fast over the mountains split. I wake in a God. I wake in arms holding my quilt, holding me as best they can inside my quilt. Someone is kissing me already. I wake, I cry, oh! I rise from the pillow. Why should I open my eyes? I open my eyes. The God lifts from the water. His head fills the bay. He is Puget Sound, the Pacific. His breast rises from pastures. His fingers are furs. Islands slide wet down his shoulders. Islands slip blue from his shoulders and glide over the water, the empty, lighted water, like a stage. Today as God rises, his long legs flecked in clouds, he flings his arms, spreading colors. He arches, cupping sky in his belly. He vaults, vaulting and spread, holding all and spread on me like skin. I invite you to join, to enjoy a musical interlude. In the Christian liturgical calendar, today marks the second Sunday of the season of Advent, the 4-week period leading up to Christmas Day, when Christmastide, the famous 12 days of Christmas, actually begins. Unlike the season of Lent before Easter, which is a time for reflection and atonement, the Advent season is a time of expectation and hope. It is a time to celebrate the birth of Jesus, which Christians believe was the incarnation of the holy into the world. Finally, after Advent and Christmastide, this season of celebration culminates on January 6th in the Feast of the Epiphany, or Three Kings Day, as it is more commonly known in many countries. According to tradition, and based on the version of the Nativity story in the Gospel of Matthew, it is the day when the Magi, or wise men from the east, arrive to behold the infant Jesus. Some people even wait until then to add the 3 wise men to their nativity scenes for this reason. I have a friend on Facebook who has sometimes posted pictures during these days leading up to Three Kings Day to show the progress of his 3 figurines around the house on the way to the manger. In Matthew's version of the Nativity story, the Magi first arrive in Jerusalem, asking, "Where is the child who has been born King of the Jews? For we observed his star at its rising, and we have come to pay him homage." There they learn of the prophecy that the Messiah would be born in nearby Bethlehem. So they continue onward to where the wandering star has stopped, finding the Christ child and presenting their gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Although the Bible does not specify the actual number of the Magi, the 3 gifts tradition developed into 3 kings. And after a few more centuries, they were given the names Caspar, Melchior, and Balthazar. In many places, especially in Spain and in Latin America, gifts are still exchanged on Three Kings Day instead of Christmas Day to commemorate the gifts of the Magi. The so-called adoration of the Magi also became a popular subject in art from early Byzantine times through the Renaissance. And even today, no traditional Christmas pageant would be complete without the appearance of the wise men. They are beloved characters, even if they only appear in Matthew's version of the story. Of course, it is very unlikely that there really were wise men from the East who somehow followed an astronomical anomaly to distant lands to wind up in Bethlehem and bestow gifts on the newborn Jesus. But that doesn't matter with respect to the theological message presented in the story. Matthew wanted people to appreciate that in Jesus, God became incarnate in the world. The birth of the Messiah was a holy indwelling of God's presence in human form. And the witness of the Magi, who were Gentiles, meant that Jesus Christ was the Messiah not just for the Jews, but for all of humankind. In fact, the three Magi have traditionally been depicted as a black, a brown, and a white man to highlight their otherness from everyone else around the manger. The Magi are confirming what God has revealed to the world, so it is an epiphany, a word derived from the Greek word epiphania, which means manifestation or appearance. In theological language, this event was also a theophany, meaning a manifestation of God's own being, since Christian tradition holds that Jesus is part of a triune God or Trinity along with God the Father and the Holy Spirit. There are very few theophanies in the Hebrew and Christian scriptures, but there are a number of epiphanies among the stories, with angels or unusual phenomena often serving as the messengers of the Almighty. To be fair, I doubt that any one of us would fail to recognize an experience of the holy if we suddenly found ourselves in the presence of angels, or if God spoke to us through a burning bush or a whirlwind. But do we really believe in the reality of such remarkable events? As religious liberals, I suspect few, if any, of us do. But I also suspect that most of us, even the most cynical of us, could describe at least one experience in our lives when we encountered a sense of the holy. I'm not suggesting it was some deep mystical experience, though it certainly might have been for some people. Rather, I believe we can encounter the holy even in the mundane moments of our lives if we are open to recognizing what life reveals to us. I'm reminded of one of the sayings attributed to Jesus in the non-canonical Gospel of Thomas. Recognize what is before your eyes, and the mysteries will be revealed to you. So what does the word holy mean to us as religious liberals? In a Unitarian Universalist congregation like this, you might find as many different ideas about the holy as there are people in the pews. If you look up the definition of holy, it says something like dedicated or consecrated to God or a religious purpose. But I think this is too narrow a definition. Some of the suggestion synonyms include sacred, which I tend to use interchangeably with holy, consecrated, hallowed, sanctified, sacrosanct, venerated, revered, divine, religious, blessed, and dedicated. And I think several of these words point to a larger sense of the holy beyond the boundaries of religious purpose or even God. And if we broaden our concept of God to include something like our ultimate concern, I think the idea of what is holy can be even greater than that. I think about people who are thought of as holy because of their compassion, or because of the spiritual wisdom they developed with or without any belief in a divine being. I think of places that are revered as holy because they just seem to resonate with some sacred energy and presence. You can feel it at places that were sites of ancient religious rituals. You can feel it in centuries-old churches, synagogues, and mosques. I remember feeling a sacredness almost everywhere in the old city of Jerusalem, where the stones themselves seem infused with some kind of spiritual energy after centuries of pilgrimage by people of many faiths. In our readings this morning, the holy was present in the forest for Mary Oliver, and for Annie Dillard, it was spread across the earth as the new day awakened. Let us also remember places that were consecrated or hallowed by human history, places of great sacrifice attesting to the human spirit, even places of unspeakable tragedy. There's just some rarefied or ineffable quality that alerts us to the presence of the holy in some places and people. Whether we see the Holy Spirit at work, or whether we attribute such feelings to our innate human capacity for awe and wonder. Several years ago, during the winter, I preached at the Unitarian Church in Fairhaven, Massachusetts. And since it was flu season, rather than shaking hands with the minister and each other during the service, they had a practice of bowing slightly to each other with hands pressed close together at the chest and exchanging the ancient greeting, Namaste. This greeting is a traditional greeting among the Hindus and the Indian subcontinent and in parts of Southeast Asia. And thanks to the global Hindu diaspora and the popularity of yoga in the West, it has become more common in American culture. The word namaste is derived from ancient Sanskrit roots, and it is a tricky word full of nuance and spiritual connotation. Western scholars have suggested the best translation is something like, I bow to the divine in you, or the sacred in me recognizes the sacred in you. I really like that last translation. Namaste. The sacred in me recognizes the sacred in you. I think it is a great entry point for exploring the question of where do you recognize the holy? I say this because I believe it is that shared sacred quality of our humanness, our capacity for self-reflection, or more poetically, our soul, or what the Quakers call our inner light, that allows us to recognize the holy in the first place. As far as we know, we humans are unique among all of Earth's creatures in our capacity for self-reflection and experiencing awe and wonder. Perhaps the French priest and philosopher Pierre Teilhard de Chardin summed it up best when he said, "We are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience." When we begin by looking inward, connecting with that still small voice, the sacred mystery, the heart of our being, we can then look outward and more easily recognize the holy in others. We can begin to feel our interconnectedness with each other, with the greater web of life, and even with the inanimate matter and energy of the universe. Taken a step further into the realm of the mystical, this feeling of interconnectedness can produce an overwhelming sense of unity, and even the dissolution of feeling like a separate self at all. Indeed, such a state of no selfness and unity is often the goal of many spiritual practices, and it is a common way people describe the mystical experience. Where do you recognize the holy? I come back to that saying from Thomas, recognize what is before your eyes, and the mysteries will be revealed to you. the holy surrounds us. The holy is manifest in our relationships, especially in the love we share with our spouse and children, our family and friends, and even our beloved pets. It reveals itself in life's transitions, the birth of a child, in the commitment of marriage, and in our dying. We meet the holy in prayer, and when we set aside sacred time and space for contemplation and worship. We encounter it when we join together in community and practice religion. Many of us experience the holy in nature, whether it is among the plants and animals of the forest, or the harsh beauty of the desert, the Arctic, or the open ocean, or high upon the craggy mountains of summits, the fierce landscapes that have inspired holy men and women for millennia to travel there on pilgrimage, to live there in isolation, or to enter with trepidation to face dark forces, both real and imagined. Or perhaps it is the familiar landscape of your own backyard, the first flower of spring, the first fruits of the garden, or an unexpected animal or bird that visits us one misty morning. People go on epic journeys in search of the holy, sometimes enduring great physical and mental challenges. But the holy can also be found sitting quietly at home, doing nothing. I have often felt the holy when a bird visits a nearby tree, especially when a male northern cardinal appears and announces his presence with a singular chirp. Birds have been seen in many cultures to be messengers from the spirit world because of their ability to fly, and some people associate male cardinals with their bright red plumage with the presence of angels or the spirits of loved ones. I am not convinced about angels or a spirit world, but I have often thought of my daughter Rachel when a cardinal appeared. There is a holiness in such moments, regardless of the supernatural possibilities we might imagine. The holy is present in small acts of kindness, especially in a spontaneous act of kindness for a stranger. It is a small witness to the connection we feel to one another simply because we are human beings. The holy can even be experienced in the sensual pleasure of a good meal or an encounter with a piece of music or work of art that touches us deeply for some reason. And though it may be hard to recognize at first, the holy is also present in our moments of darkness and despair, in the pain and suffering of our sickness and grief. The personal narrative of someone confronting a terminal illness is a sacred story, as is the testimony of a Holocaust survivor. When we struggle through the dark night of the soul, our despair can become a sacred wound that allows us to pour out even more compassion on the world. The holy surrounds us, and we should welcome its presence in this fractured world. But to recognize it, we must first be open to it. I suppose you could live in a way that deliberately avoids the holy at all cost, but what a tragic life that would be. And frankly, I don't think it's really possible. One way or another, the sacred within each of us is bound to connect with it. Let us make a place and instead do the opposite. Let us seek out the holy wherever we can find it. Let us make a place for the singing of angels, even in the ordinary activity of our lives. Recognize what is before your eyes, and the mysteries will be revealed to you. may it be so. I invite you to join our closing hymn, number 352, Find a Stillness. Our closing words are a teaching from the Zen master Dogen Zenji, who lived in the 13th century. You should entreat trees and rocks to preach the Dharma, and you should ask rice fields and gardens for the truth. Ask pillars for the Dharma and learn from hedges and walls. Long ago, the great god Indra honored a wild fox as his own master and sought the Dharma from him, calling him Great Bodhisattva.
We will now extinguish our chalice with the following words. They should be in your order of service. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.